كانت العربان يا بوي لهليب ونار يا بوي.
This episode was originally produced in Arabic and then translated and dubbed into English.
This kind of response will open the floodgates for comments such as, "No, women are honored by our customs and traditions. Our traditions do not deprive women of anything," while really, these customs and traditions encourage the killing of women and silence women if they were harassed or deprive a woman of her inheritance. So no, customs and traditions are not always in favor of women.
لأنك بنت. مين مننا ما سمعتش العبارة دي؟
Because you're a girl. Who among us has not heard this at least once in her life, from her parents or family or community? Who of us has not had to change something about her life or make another choice regarding a simple aspect of her daily life because of the excuse that this is not customary or that's not part of our customs? Today you are listening to a new episode of the Aswatuna podcast, where we are talking about customs and traditions and their relationship to gender. We discussed the confrontations we had with society at any point in our lives. Most of us have given in to society in such situations, but a small number of us have insisted on opening the door to a different way of life. In this episode, we try to ask questions and think together. What do we mean when we use words like traditions, customs, and societal norms? How do they form our understanding of gender? Do these concepts affect the lives of women and men and their choices in the same way?
خلال إعدادنا للحلقة سألنا شباب وشابات من مختلف البلدان.
For this episode, we spoke to several young men and women from different Arab countries about their personal understanding of traditions, customs, and societal norms. Despite the differences between societies in each country, we still found similarities and intersections, especially in the experiences of women. This is why many of the young Arab women listening to this episode will see themselves in many of the situations Lina El-Hajj was in which she went against society and the effect this had on her.
My name is Lina Al-Hajj. I am 26 years old, and right now I work in an NGO in Amman. More or less, my area of experience is human security and far-right politics, things like that. I come from a middle-class family originating from Palestine in the city of Erbil.
لينا بتحكي لنا عن تجاربها الشخصية.
Lina tells us about her experiences in the Jordanian context and how traditions and customs were planted in her since early childhood, especially since she is a girl who grew up in a society where traditions do not apply the same restrictions and pressures on men.
At that time, I did not know what traditions and customs were, but I connected them to the idea of doing something wrong. Now in my 20s, I have come to understand that girls are raised to stay silent. You're told to look at your feet when you're walking to school. If someone talks to you on the street, do not answer them. You're not allowed to go to any shops where men are working alone, even if they were old. All these examples show how girls are raised to be tied down by chains of traditions and customs.
في السياق ده في العادة
These three terms, traditions, customs, and norms, are conflated in a social context. These concepts are all related, but they do not point to the same thing. We spoke to Dr. Aya Salah, who is an associate professor of communication, media, and gender at the Faculty of Media and the Center for Studies and Research on Gender and Development at Sarra University.
We need to differentiate between traditions and customs. Traditions are behaviors that do not have to be either positive or negative. It is a copied behavior generation after generation. It is handed down, and that is why we call them traditions. Customs are more like habits. They are not social, but rather individual. A person gets accustomed to a particular habit or certain relationships and reactions. This is different than traditions that last for years and years and maybe centuries for some people.
إذن نقدر نقول إن العادة فردية والتقليد مجتمعي متوارث. ومن كلام الدكتور
So we could say that habits are individual while traditions are socially inherited.
هو أقرب للعرف. وإن اللي بيصيغ الأعراف
We can gather from Dr. Abdallah's explanation that what is referred to as traditions in our daily lives is more of a social norm.
وعشان كده
Social norms are created by those with authority, those who have power and influence in society. And they are mostly men, as Dr. Abdallah said. So we will find that social norms generally marginalize the rights of weaker groups, like women and minorities. But where do traditions and social norms come from? Why is there a conflation between social norms, which can change according to society, culture, and with time for the general good, and religious obligations?
أحياناً بتكون هذه الأعراف مستمدة من إما ثقافة المجتمع نفسه وتاريخه.
These social norms usually spring from the culture of the society or its history, and at times from religion. Some social norms are derived from religious rules as a source of imposing norms because they're just social rules. Social norms are social laws. Some societies do not comply with them, and others do. It depends. Traditional societies that have not been through many changes still uphold these imposed norms strongly and openly. In societies like Egypt, for instance, maybe they function in Sinai or Upper Egypt or some parts of it. But in the bigger cities, Egypt is made up of larger cities than rural towns, laws have replaced social norms.
مصر مكونة من مدن كبرى أكثر منها مدن ريفية فعادة العرف هنا القانون جاء وحل محل الأعراف يعني.
الدكتور عبد الله أضاف كمان إنه في فترات الحروب والنزاعات اللي في العادة بيضعف فيها تطبيق القانون.
Dr. Abdallah also added that in periods of wars and conflict, laws become weaker on account of the weakened state of the nation and its institutions. At such times, societies hold on to social norms as a way of coming together and facing change. These historical moments of upheaval can push many individuals in a society to turn to religious extremism because it is based on social norms. This explains the period of the Arab Spring and how it was a tumultuous one for many youths in our Arab region. For example, Lina was a teenager in school at that time, and she lived through an astonishing experience, one that was religiously extreme. The experience that Lina went through completely changed her, and yet she did not face any fear from her community and family, who are not, according to her, strictly religious. On the contrary, this change was welcomed and met with support.
ولكن ما كانت في مرجعية وهذا الشيء أدى إنه عائلتي.
But I had no religious reference. This experience made my family happy with the radical change that overcame me. It was not reasonable at all, but a truly extreme change. I went from a child who was not even veiled to wearing the veil and jilbab, which is a loose and wide dress, and even the veil I wore was very long. I refused to walk or go out with my sisters who were not veiled. Anyone who disagreed with my, in quotation marks, religious beliefs, I declared an infidel. When I come to think of it, this was a really scary thing. But according to my family, the girl got veiled and wore white clothes. She found the path to God at such an early age, which made them proud. Yet there was no supervision.
Lina poses a crucial question here.
Why were there no customs and traditions then? When it comes to being religious, customs and traditions do not put any boundaries.
At this age, Lina chose the, in quotation marks, more superficial aspects of being religious. When she grew up and wondered what made her become this extreme in her religious beliefs, she realized that she was simply looking to feel accepted and included. The thought of believing in something and praying is comforting. How Lina behaved, however, had nothing to do with being religious or her faith. She was rather seeking the perfect image that is socially acceptable. It was the image that faced the least critique or remarks.
كان هو الشعور بالاحتياج إني تابعة لجماعة.
It was that feeling of need to belong to a community, to people who would accept me and I would be like them. Because in childhood, I did not have any friends. This is where this need to belong and be accepted in a community comes from. I wanted to be like them. Because it suits our traditions that a girl would conform by covering up completely. This is the image of the perfect girl who is directed by the society. Even if a girl is incredibly young, when she covers up, it's a great thing. Her parents are applauded for her upbringing.
بس لينا اللي اختارت إنها تخوض تجربة الحجاب في مرحلة ما.
Lina, who chose to get veiled at a certain point, went through other experiences when her choices were not always accepted, like her decision to take her veil off.
هاي المرحلة جدا مرهقة. كنت وقتها
This was a tiring period of my life. Minor battles started when I began thinking of taking off the veil. According to my mother, not according to any religious backdrop, but a social one. How can you take off the veil? What will people say? Even though it was an emotionally directed choice in the first place, when I started to wear the veil. Only now it started a fight, and I could not go through with it back then.
خلينا نرجع هنا الوقفة مع دكتور عبد الله بيحكي لنا فيها عن
Let us return to Dr. Abdallah, who will tell us more about the symbolic significance of the veil to our traditions and why society accepts Lina being extreme at one point and consider her informed and capable of taking such a decision, but refuse to see her the same way when she chose to take it off.
موضوع الحجاب الآن اللي في الحالة اللي تكلمت عنها هو موضوع
Now, in this case, you talked about being veiled has nothing to do with being religious as much as being culturally common in society and people's habits. Let me give you an example from Yemen, where many women cover their faces. They wear the niqab, not out of the belief that it is a religious requirement or that it is haram if they do not cover their faces, but because it is a socially created habit. A colleague of mine lived abroad with his wife where she covered her hair. But when they returned to Yemen, she insisted that she cover her face with a niqab. Why? Because she said, my family would never accept me while only wearing the veil. It has nothing to do with religion, really, but it is fueled by common traditions and social habits. Not necessarily positive or negative habits, but it is one people have become accustomed to, and humans by nature try not to be different.
دخلت لينا الجامعة وخرجت على بيئة أوسع. في المرحلة دي
Lina went to university and was exposed to a wider social milieu. At this phase, Lina faced new societal pressures with the simplest of choices. For example, participating in university activities meant mingling and socializing with her male colleagues, or moving more freely. Although these are normal behaviors, they are viewed by some Arab families as transgressing the stereotypical image of the good girl. Restrictions push many girls in Arab societies to live a double life outside their parents' homes. They hide the details of their daily life. Although these girls believe they are not doing something wrong, they only want to experience new things and discover their potential and who they are in a society where their parents isolate them, with the excuse of protecting them. Our conversation with Dr. Abdallah led us to the conclusion that customs and traditions do not treat people in the same society equally. Some habits affect people of all genders badly, like smoking. Even the religious opinion about it is the same and does not make a difference regarding gender. However, traditionally in some societies, smoking is acceptable for men, while women who smoke are stigmatized. Why are customs and traditions more lenient with men, but limit women to certain roles and stereotypical images, and even punish them for going against them?
هذا بيرجع إلى الثقافة الأبوية المتجذرة في ثقافتنا بشكل عام، ثقافتنا المجتمعية، مش ثقافة الأسرة الواحدة، لكن الأسرة.
This is caused by the patriarchy deeply rooted in our social culture, and not just family culture.
حتى في سلوكنا السياسي أحيانا.
Unfortunately, family culture is shaped by prevailing patriarchal traditions, even in our politics at times. I mean, the social behaviors that form political parties, etc. In this context, you will find that men are in control, and they form most of these parties. Women's participation is simply a complementary thing, and at times they are absent. The problem is the culture of patriarchy which forces these norms. Patriarchy plays a role in familial behavior. This explains why some families force things on male family members while they deprive female members of the same thing, whether boys and girls or men and women.
بتواصل لينا حياتها وبحثها عن هويتها الثقافية والاجتماعية والسياسية.
Lina gets on with her life and tries to find her cultural, social, and political identity. She has many discussions with her parents every time she makes a choice that is unfamiliar to them. Lina decided to take the hijab off in a later phase of her life and chose to travel alone despite familial and social difficulties. She even moved to the capital Amman when she decided to enroll in postgraduate studies. Lina lived alone with foreign students. At that time, she faced much criticism from her family as well as assumptions that Lina is changing.
هم شافوا إنه وحدة عايشة لحالها.
They see a young woman living alone and working in Amman. She has money and stable job with financial stability. She travels and her parents give her space and freedom. I'm so sorry for what I'm going to say, but people think she will be uncontrollable.
كان وعي لينا المجتمعي للي بيحصل.
Lina's awareness of the society around her was growing with every new experience. She started thinking about how her parents were also suffering. They too were victims of the society that judged them for trusting Lina and giving her any space for freedom.
I consider my parents social rebels in a way or another at the time. They allowed their daughter to live in another city, to work, to study, and to travel abroad. It really was not easy for them.
وهنا بنحط سؤال بيخطر على بال بنات كتير.
This represents a question that comes to the minds of many young women. What are the boundaries between us and our immediate and extended families when it comes to our life choices? Why do personal matters turn into a family issue when there's room for criticism and limiting freedom? On the other hand, the family is not a safe space at times of need. Lina told us of a misogynistic and painful personal experience that happened when she was doing her master at the University of Jordan.
هي بعتبرها يمكن هاي من أكثر المواقف اللي مؤذية.
I think of this as one of the most hurtful situations I experienced. I'm certain many other girls have gone through the same thing. I was verbally harassed by one of my MA teachers. I honestly had no idea what to do at the time. I had no background knowledge, no legal awareness. I did not know what would happen if I went and filed a complaint. I put myself together and filed a complaint, and I remember the university opened an investigation. The strange thing is that my parents were out of the picture completely, so I was not sure at the time how they would react if I told them what was going on. Would they have told me to pack my things and come home, or would they stand by my side?
يعني هل رح يحكوا لي لم أغراضك وارجعي ولا حيوقفوا معي؟
المجتمع نفسه اللي حاكم لينا على اختياراتها سابها وما دعمهاش.
The society that judged Lina for her choices did not support her call for rightful action against the person who harassed her on the university campus. This campus, which supposedly stands for knowledge, culture, and progression, was propagating immoral actions, sexism, and silencing women in the name of tradition.
بس مجتمع الجامعة كان بعرف اللي هو يفترض شباب وبنات مثقفين.
But the student community at the university, both guys and girls, were supposed to be cultured. They would have prestigious jobs later. Strangely enough, the girls judged me. They called me names that I do not want to repeat here because they were hurtful. These girls were harassed by the same person who harassed me, but they did not stand by me. They ganged up against me.
بس ليه المجتمع بيخاف؟
Why is society so scared though? Why did the other girls reject Lina's different choice? They did not even stand by her when they knew she was a victim. Dr. Abdallah gave us an explanation of why people fear change and prefer clutching at traditions even if they are harmful. This behavior stems from the deep roots of our upbringing, which has also been shaped by tradition.
الخوف من الاختلاف أو الخوف من مواجهة
Fear of anything different, fear of confrontation, fear of going against society or its culture. All this is very common. The fear is the main reason why societal change is so slow to happen in our societies. It comes down to upbringing, how we are raised in our homes. Fathers are not used to discussing issues with their children. He gives orders and they are required to comply. The same thing happens at school because it is the same people. I go to university or school and behave in the same authoritative and patriarchal manner. So it all starts with this flawed upbringing, the traditional way of raising children that is handed down across generations. It does not encourage thinking or open discussions.
في ختام لقائنا مع دكتور عبد الله
We asked Dr. Abdallah at the end of our interview, how can we help manage changing social norms, especially those that violate basic human rights, like child marriage or female genital mutilation. Dr. Abdallah told us that social change happens on quite a large scale, but it starts with the individual. Awareness starts with the family, schools, and even social media outlets, when these spaces encourage discussion and critical thinking to confront the culture of social norms. Lina and all the difficulties that she is faced with does not represent a single case in her society. Rather, she is part of the positive change that future generations need, so they belong to communities that are aware of their rights and more accepting of differences.
I truly do not regret that period of my life. If it were not for this phase of my life, I would not enjoy the freedom I exercise now. Because of this difficult phase, with all the conflict and my family's fear that they might lose their daughter, I was given small pockets of freedom that I could expand.
شكرا لاستماعكم للحلقة.
Thank you for listening to this episode. The episode was written by Bayan Arouri. Sarra Abdelrahman did the editing and proofreading. Sound editing was done by me, your host, Aya Salah. Produced by Sarra, Bayan, and Aya.